men created evil, spread it all over the land.
You know the way it is when you're trying to catch up on emails. I have lots of people I have subscribed to, and after a while then I might let it go for a couple of days or even a week without ever reading any at all. And today I was going through my emails and it came across something really exciting. So I want to share this with you in audio because people might be more inclined to listen when somebody is speaking rather than having to read through a lot of difficult material, as I suppose you could categorize it. But I won't make it too complicated anyway. This is written by a chap called Philip Jones on the 24th of September 2009. And this was shortly before the second Lisbon referendum and the referendum on the Lisbon Treaty that was kind of given to us a second time. Rather than as we had done before, we had rejected it when not by a large majority, but it was rejected, and they weren't very pleased with that, so they served it up to us again in 2009. And this is what he wrote. I'm just going to read this out to you. I might make the odd remark in between, but bear with me anyway. His name is, did I say his name was Philip Jones? He wrote this on the 24th of September 2009, and the poor chap actually died of poisoning shortly after. I think it was in October or November. He was a blogger. He lived in Denmark. He had spent a lot of time and put a lot of thought observing what was going on in society, and he could see how Denmark, because it's a smaller country, how it was being manipulated from the outside, and how, we'll say, a couple of years there'd be some issue or other would have huge coverage and would be more or less pushed upon the population of Denmark until it became more or less part of their society. And he began to question how this was working. And he has written loads of material of his that describe where it actually comes from, and it comes from the Illuminati. So I'm going to read this particular blog because it refers specifically to the upcoming referendum a short time later. So this article was originally posted in October of last year. That would have been 2008. With the Irish referendum on the Lisbon Treaty only a week or so away, I felt it timely to repost it in order that the people of Europe, and the Irish in particular, understand that what is at stake is nothing less than the choice between freedom and slavery. So you see, he is warning us just shortly before the referendum, but I doubt if many Irish people actually were able to read this. The European Union is a major aspect of the New World Order and the so-called Sustainable Development Movement. The main objective of the federal European state to be is absolute social, personal and economic control in a collectivist and corporatist society. The philosophy behind the EU is a strange mixture of capitalism and communism, a form of Euro-Marxism which owes much of its dogma to the pre-World War II Italian Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci. The nearest ideology to that practiced by the EU is something called communitarianism, or what Tony Blair called the third way. Isn't that interesting? This is 2009. I mean, I came back here to Ireland in 2008, and very few people had internet at the time, so I doubt if people were aware of these bloggers, of these people who had given a great deal of thought to what was going on in society and who were very, very aware, and they were trying to warn us, but sure, we're right in the middle of it now anyway. So I'll continue reading. We are talking of a dialectical trap here, with corporate money funding socialism as thesis, ideological socialism as antithesis, and communitarianism as the new imperium as synthesis. Money grabs and concentrates power, while state socialism promises the total redistribution of ownership and wealth. This contradiction provides an almost irresistible dynamic. Communitarians want to create a postmodern, post-democratic, feudal society run by a small number of rich and powerful people, with everyone else working as peasants. In order to achieve their objectives, they must destroy the middle class and the nation state. Can anyone deny that their goals are firmly on course? Now, this is 10 years later. We are looking at Ireland, at Irish people being punished, being called racist because they're proud of their nation state. They want to re-establish their nation state. They want to recover and restore our nation state. And what is happening? We are being criminalized for doing that. I'll continue. One of the most mysterious aspects of the European Union from a layman's standpoint is the decision-making process. Even with only the bare minimum of research, it becomes clear that we, the people, have little or no influence on any of the decisions reached in our name and the subsequent dictates which inevitably follow. In this essay, I will try and identify the ideology and aims of the key socio-economic decisions that drive the EU, and how, because of these decisions, our lives are increasingly no longer our own. Now, that was 10 years ago, remember? I keep reminding you, that was 10 years ago. So, I mean, where do we stand now? Are our lives our own? Continue reading. The socio-political economic agenda of the EU is carefully and intentionally buried beneath myriad layers of tedious and unintelligible newspeak. Despite this, in recent years, as the pace of so-called EU reform has quickened, many researchers like myself have begun to expose and unravel this intentionally obtuse and often ambiguous jargon and reveal it for what it really is: a tool of confusion and misinformation, intended towards the enslavement of the people of Europe by the rule of dictate and economic servitude. Is it any wonder that that man was poisoned? Once the spotlight of investigation is shone directly at the beast, inverted commas, the beast, what emerges is a communitarian agenda driven solely by corporate interests. Monetary profit is to be the bottom line on everything, from public services to defence to the very useful environmental Trojan horse. High-sounding non-descriptions precede cleverly worded specifics that determine that the one and only benchmark is to be an economic one. The truth is, of course, that if the people of Europe themselves were to engage in setting the EU agenda, the current programme would almost without question be reversed. Instead of the mammonistic ideal of profit before all, we would most certainly witness an agenda dominated by life quality issues like real, unpoliticised education for our children and a healthcare service not tied to the pharmaceutical conglomerates and free of political restraint, with a remit to provide the very best treatment available, whether it be of the traditional or alternative varieties. The roots and goals of the new feudalism. Anarchists would probably say that the basis of the EU agenda rests squarely with the ruling classes. But although in actuality correct, sooner than leave it at that, it is useful to unravel the ball of string by which the Union's decisions are formulated, created, morphed into diktat, and then monitored. For what appears from beneath the shroud are the most corrupting and powerful corporations in Europe, greed entities with no pretense of any mandate beyond their combined annual turnover of 950 million euros, and the fact they employ only around 4 million workers on a continent inhabited by almost 500 million people. Much of the ideological base for the EU agenda can be found in the works of Count R.N. Coudenhove-Kalergi, who is justifiably regarded by many as the godfather, in inverted commas, of the European Union. It was his suggestion that Beethoven's hymn be the EU's anthem, and he was extremely active in connection with the design of the EU logo. It was Coudenhove who founded the Pan-European Union in the early part of the 20th century. It is interesting to note that his successor in the movement was Otto von Habsburg, an honorary professor of the University of Jerusalem and a recipient of the International Humanitarian Award of the Anti-Defamation League. Coudenhove-Kalergi's father was a close friend of Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism. Coudenhove's vision for Europe was of a vast feudal fiefdom, with a small group of money aristocrats ruled a population of serfs through a plutocratic false democratism, which we see today holds thrall over the whole of the continent. His vision was shared, funded and sponsored by the bloodline and moneyed families of both Europe, the Rothschilds, and the USA, the Rockefellers. In fact, since the end of World War II, the major dynamic behind the federalist vision has come not from the European side, but from the Eastern Seaboard establishment. Families such as the Rockefellers, Harrimans, Morgans, Dulles, and Bushes. Who are the Bushes? So we have spoken a lot, and a lot of us have known about this Coudenhove-Kalergi plan for Europe, where Coudenhove himself, this man didn't say here that Coudenhove was married to a Japanese lady, and somehow he had this idea then that all races should be wiped out, basically. Everybody should be free to, well, we are free anyway, but it should all be watered down to just one kind of race all over Europe and possibly the whole world, which of course is part of the New World Order. So we were quite aware of this fellow, but again, Ireland was not prepared. Ireland did not know about these plans. It's only since the era of the internet, the last 10 years, that people are becoming educated through people like the chap that wrote this, other people who are blogging, who are putting videos, who are recording outside, who are talking to people, who are challenging governmental decisions and all that kind of stuff, and leading up to the subsequent referenda or referendums, I don't know which you say, which were the rights of the child, the gay marriage referendum and the abortion referendum. I know, I can just imagine what this fellow would have to say if he was alive today and he was writing about, he would so see himself vindicated for predicting what is actually going on right now. So I'll continue reading here as well. Theatre for the Masses is the title here. The plan, I think, is the old one of world dominion in a new form. The money power and revolutionary power have been set up and given sham but symbolic shapes, capitalism or communism here in brackets, and sharply defined citadels in brackets again, America or Russia. Such is the spectacle publicly staged for the masses. But what if similar men with a common aim secretly rule in both camps and propose to achieve their ambition through the clash between these masses? I believe any diligent student of our times will discover that this is the case. This theatrical struggle between capitalism and communism over the inheritance of their bloodline aristocracy is a fratricidal war of the blood aristocracies, a fight between individualistic and socialist, egoist and altruist, heathen and Christian ideals. The generals in this make-believe battle of both parties are recruited from Europe's secret societies and brotherhoods, who can all be canopied beneath the metaphorical tarpaulin of the, guess who? Illuminati. Both capitalism and communism are rational, mechanical constructs. The time of the old military caste nobility has passed. The effect of the synthesis and its power, namely the belief in it, along with the hope that its time is nearing, is now growing exponentially, and with it the audacity and arrogance of the new aristocracy. Through their puppet politicians sitting furtively in national parliaments, the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, and the plethora of other front organisations, their European project appear close to becoming a reality, a first step along the road to the New World Order. Now, if it was close to becoming a reality 10 years ago, you can imagine how far advanced along the road it is now. At the 4th Annual Conference of the Institute for the Scientific Study of International Relations at Copenhagen in June 1931, which was published in the magazine of the Council of Foreign Relations in December of that year, the following statement was read out, inverted commas. We are at present working discreetly with all our might to wrest this mysterious force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local national states of our world. And all the time we are denying with our lips what we are doing with our hands. Because to impugn the sovereignty of the local national states of the world is still a heresy for which a statesman or a publicist can be, perhaps not quite burned at the stake, but certainly ostracized and discredited. Can you imagine that now? They wrote this in 1931. We are at present working discreetly, but with all our might, to wrest, W-R-E-S-T, this mysterious force called sovereignty, and this is what we're talking about today. Ireland is called sovereign. It's written there somewhere. We are a sovereign state. So, and this mysterious force is sovereignty out of the clutches of the local national states of our world, including Ireland, of course. The methodology of communitarianist fascism. The EU project has up until recently been subtle in the extreme. He's talking here now in 2009. The EU project has up until recently been subtle in the extreme. Step by laborious step, one treaty after the other, they have hidden their true intentions behind an economic smokescreen, aided by a population who have abdicated responsibility for the decision-making in their lives to liars, cheats and degenerates, who, whilst masquerading as elected representatives of the people, have conspired to disenfranchise them completely. Now, as we writhe and squirm amidst the worst economic crisis in living history, the corporate plan for total control of the continent in the first instance and the planet in the second is nearing successful completion. What amazes this writer he's talking about himself here, is that there are still those amateur researchers who, although far more informed than the average state media programmed resource, still cannot understand that these are not chaotic times. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. The project is completely on track and nearing its conclusion. So arrogant are the Lord and Masters now that even a minor detail, such as the Irish referendum no vote, does not deter their ambitions. So how were a relatively small cadre of conspirators able to achieve this astonishing level of supremacy over a population of almost 500 million people? That's the whole of Europe. How? A detailed dissection of this question is not feasible in an essay of this kind, but an examination of the above diagram will help us understand the main instruments of control by which all the countries of Europe, even those outside the bloc, still incredulously clamouring for membership, have handed over control to the European federalists. Keep in mind that this is written in 2009. The illegitimate money power without any public mandate, drawing its strength from usury, monopoly capitalism and the industrial military complex. The source of all great power in the 21st century and the 20th before, it is money. And the root and base of this power is usury. That is the issue of money as interest-bearing debt. Since the 1980s, banks and lenders have seemingly been falling over themselves to lend money. Now, as we try to ride out our present woes, we are told that money is scarce. Why is it scarce? Because the same people who are lending it so willingly are no longer doing so. They create money as figures on a screen in the form of loans. It is money out of thin air, backed by nothing other than the people's taxes, and the belief that it exists and that it has some worth. In this way, they have enticed millions of people to sign their freedom away for the promise of a new home, car, kitchen or bathroom. Then, when the time was right, which is now, they started calling in unpaid loans, manipulating prices, raising interest rates, and destroying jobs and manufacturing production in the process. Then, with all the people in fear for their existence, and terrified of what the future might bring, demanding naively that something be done, they come up with the solution they had planned all along. More centralization of bank ownership, state and corporate mergers through government buyout packages, and the call for a uniform across-the-board single currency, not only for Europe but for the whole planet. When the dust settles, we will see that the middle classes have been so badly damaged that their political and economic power base will be no more. This is how fiefdoms and servitude is established. Going on now to talk about the corporate media. Supplied with unlimited funds and control over the mass media, the new lords of money have been able to dictate what is given to the public by way of knowledge and information. Through television and radio, they use subliminal messaging technology to entrap and entice people into exchanging their identities as individual human souls for that of consumers. They manipulate all avenues of news reporting, ensuring that the third way consensus is consolidated and maintained. Did you hear that? The third way. That was the term coined by Tony Blair for the big plan for Europe. The European ideal is paramount, and our children are indoctrinated into it by the most subtle and non-subtle of means. Popular music and movies, loaded with trigger sounds and words, have created a dumbing down effect across the continent, which is matched and exceeded only in some respects by what can be found in the same media form across the Atlantic. With a owned and controlled compliant press in tow, which simply repeats and enlarges upon the lies of the 6 o'clock news from the evening before, it is little wonder that the vast majority's idea of reality is totally askew. Oh my God. How he predicted this present day, 2019. But we have been talking about it for the past several years, about this subliminal messaging, about advertising. Advertising is nothing else than subliminal messaging and overt messaging as well. You know, like, I don't know if anybody ever told you all these cleaning agents that you find in homes. Antibacterial, whiter than white. You have whole presses full of cleaning agents, and basically what the advertisements are appealing to is your conscience, and for you to be a clean person with a clean and clear conscience, and you do the best for your family, which is of course by our products. I mean, this is a way of manipulating people's minds. None of that stuff washes whiter than white. I mean, you can't get whiter than white. It's so ridiculous. I mean, you can't get cleaner than clean. It's just most of these cleaning agents just have vinegar. They have baking soda. They have soda crystals, things like that in them, which are pretty good. Bought on their own for 99 cents. Just have 3 things in your press, and that's enough to keep your whole house as clean as it needs to be. Okay, I'm going to go on now and read another little bit here about politics. The financial control and manipulation of politics, along with the concerted undermining of private enterprise capitalism, combined with a progressive programme of state EU interference in all aspects of private commerce, has all but destroyed this once proud and independent feature of the European way of life. The mystery of 21st century European politics is the little understood relationship between monopoly, capitalism and Marxism. 2 irrefutable facts of 20th century history, although not generally known, is that without huge financial support from the West, the Russian Revolution would not have happened, and that the industrial and military strength of the USSR was almost entirely a creation of the West. Inside the EU, precisely the same techniques and motives have been powerfully at work, undermining systematically the individual member states' private enterprise capitalist system, substituting in its stead elements of pure socialism, and not surprisingly, the EU Commission can be seen to have been implementing in many ways Marx's own 10 points, which are calculated to bring the whole bloc under a socialist corporatist imperium, namely a communitarian new European order. The Canadian professor and author Henry Makow puts it this way: the Illuminati's revolutionary goal is the New World Order, or authoritarian socialism run by monopoly capital. It is big government in the service of big business, the left in the service of the right. There's some more here now about foreign policy. The European Unionists see their project as a revival of ancient Rome, a new European order along the lines of the Roman Empire, Pax Europa, if you will. This vision of a pan-European superpower has always been the end game, and disciples of this ideal have been growing in both support and popularity within the inner sanctum of the Commission over the past few decades. The view is that only without the scenario of superpower Europe will greater Europe achieve its rightful world power potential. Therefore, it is rationalized that the final goal of a European state should be pursued. All central political competence, interior foreign policy, defence, social and economic policies must be communitized. The EU, already developing in the direction of superpower Europe, would always be capable of accepting new members. Thus, it would be globally the only system which could continually expand its territory. Then, the great political and economic power potential of the EU would achieve parity with the USA. It is necessary to understand that this emerging superbloc is only truly relevant in the context of any future world government organization. a superpower only inasmuch as it forms one regional supranational entity, as would a North American Union and an Asia-Pacific Union, all subordinated to the world government and army. On to culture. The subversion of national culture, including literature, art, music, and the undermining of institutions and traditions, church, family, and morality, was a prerequisite to establishing the communitarian supranational state. Only by severing the people's roots to these aspects of national life could the conspiratorial goals be realized. Organ transplant, surgeons encounter a problem called rejection, whereby the organ receiver's body, programmed by nature, rejects the new organ because it simply does not belong. Similarly, before a population can be expected to tolerate any new system of control, means must be found to reduce said populace to a condition of apathetic servitude. Does that seem familiar? Winston Churchill showed his understanding of this when he wrote back in 1922 that there could be no world government as envisaged by Marxists, except on the basis of an induced state of universal arrested development. Since the end of World War II, the peoples of Europe, along with the rest of humankind, have been through various means reduced to exactly that state. This has been achieved via a diabolical program of culture distortion, using subversive genres of popular music, even more degrading and perverse forms of pornography, theatre and cinema themes which distort reality and show an inverted and corrupted ideal of all that is natural, moral and good, together with the encouragement of decadence in every possible form. Briefly put, the substitution of a people's own indigenous culture with forms of entertainment contrived to instill confusion on a mass scale and paralyze the collective will at source. This undermining and subversion of the culture is openly promoted and encouraged by the media whores of the new lords of money, with the most degraded, drug-addicted so-called artists being touted as role models for our youth. Who comes to mind there? No names mentioned. Or wait a minute, we might just put in a few names. We'll put in the one name that's more or less in every home and every conversation is Kanye West, the supposedly converted to Christianity superstar who is controlling the youth of today. That's one of them. Who else comes to mind but Prince Andrew at this particular time? He's in the media for his ugly little parties and with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and she is the daughter of a publisher, actually, Robert Maxwell, who controlled the media for a long time. And here we have the very situation that is 10 years later than the man described back there that I'm reading out to you. The very same situation, subversion of everything that is good and perversion. Science must be controlled and manipulated in order to prevent any obstruction being placed in the way of the communitarians. For sake of necessity, there must be truth at least in some of the academic disciplines, such as maths, physics, chemistry, etc. These the money power need and must have for patently obvious reasons. But it cannot allow at any cost a truth or truths which at last give pure knowledge to mankind and allows the useless eaters to liberate themselves from the millennia of deception they have been subjected to. Scientific truths about the heavenly bodies during the Renaissance were nowhere near as suppressed as are the genuine products of scientific research today in all these fields of inquiry which cause man to explore his own self, such as anthropology, genetics, psychology, and history. The persecution and defamation of those who refuse to accept and conform can be traced back time and again to the illegitimate money power which in reality always decides who is appointed to a teaching post at a university and who is not, whose work and research is published, and whose is condemned to obscurity. And on that subject, all we have to mention is vaccines or flu shots, whether they're beneficial or not. I mean, nobody's going to tell you that they are absolutely useless and that they're just there to make money. Because if any scientist did come forward, he would be dead by now. And we know there have been numerous deaths of doctors who have had the audacity to claim that natural methods may be superior to some of the pharmaceutical medicines on the market right now. And it's the same with publishing. I mean, the publishing houses are controlled as well by the super rich. And I know in Germany there's only one or two medical publishers, and they're not going to take stuff that contradicts their own theories or their own plan. They too will be in on this new world order thing, and they're not going to have a natural scientist say come along, present his data and publish it, and to make what is being sold for millions of dollars obsolete within a week. So that's definitely not going to happen. So it's all controlled as we speak today, 10 years later. I mean, just think, this is 2009 that this man was predicting all this. Of course, he wasn't predicting it. He was observing. He had gathered all this information and put it together in simple words. Well, there was a few big words there that I stumbled over, but don't mind that. He was warning us Irish back then in 2009 what would be ahead of us if we signed up for the Lisbon Treaty, and it has all come to pass. And I must say, I really, really I take my hat off, we'll say my proverbial hat off to this Philip Jones person for having such a deep cognition of what was going on, and to have put that into words. There was a few complicated words there and I stumbled over them, but don't mind that. It's all about this plan, the New World Order. This has been in the making for so long, and we have quotes going back there to the 30s, to Winston Churchill, to right across the decades. It has been planned step by step. I think I've been talking for over 30 minutes now, maybe 40 minutes. So I'm going to close it down for today. I'm going to love you and leave you with these thoughts. Maybe it'll wake somebody up that hasn't really realized what's going on, who think we are conspiracy theorists, that we're not actually describing a conspiracy as it has been planned and as it is now being implemented. That's what we are doing. We people who are being ostracized, who are being spit out really as being like me, you old coffin dodger, what the heck are you talking about? Or other people are religious fanatic, and all these kind of buzzwords that shut you down and stop you from really saying what you think, and maybe even thinking what you say. Anyway, I'll leave you for now. I'm going to look more into what he has written, and I'll be back very soon again with more of that. Ciao.
God created the world